Welcome back to The Few Show, everybody. My name is Jim. I'm the co-founder of Xfusion.io and the co-host of The Few Show. I'm excited today to be joined by my guest, Dan Beck. Dan is the co-founder of 401 Go, and he loves small businesses. Having started and been involved in over a dozen small businesses and startups, he has come to realize that business size is less important and that people matter. Culture is king. Thanks so much for joining us, Dan.
Yeah, glad to be here, Jim.
So let's jump right into this. We're going to definitely talk about 401 Go, but before we do, I recognize that in your past, you've been a bootstrapper and now you have raised funds. So I'm curious to hear what led to the decision to fundraise and how that experience was for you.
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been very entrepreneurial, and I think there's a lot of glamour that goes into, like fundraising, and you read and, Inc. and Fortune and all the, the business magazines about these companies that have had, a Series A and they've raised, tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. And there's kind of a mystique associated with it. And so there was certainly that lure, especially early on in my, various endeavors. But I think the further along I got, having bootstrapped and built several businesses, through just self-funded, that allure disappeared, because I also realized that, at the end of the day, I'm only accountable to myself and, my family, really. They're my shareholders. And so it's different, I'll say that. And I'm glad that I've had this opportunity, because it's forced me to do things that I'm not normally comfortable with, and it's helped me to better who I am. And I think really for me, a lot of the different businesses that I've been involved in, they have kind of that element at the base of them where it's an opportunity for me to grow and do something new, rather than just kind of rinse repeat. And this is also one of those businesses where you really have to have a big pool of money, because it takes some time to get to that tipping point where, you've got enough critical mass that you could be self-sustaining. So I certainly have modeled that. And early on, that was my intention when I, had modeled the growth of the company and planned it and everything like that. And I think if anything, as I shopped it around to, potential investors, it was too conservative, where they wanted to see aggressive growth. And, their thought is you're not spending enough on marketing based off of these pro forma financials. And so I've had to change my mindset a little bit to be very much more aggressive when it comes to the growth side of things. But at the same time, it's kind of exciting, because it allows us to move a lot faster than I normally would in the past. And I'm an impatient person.
Okay, that makes sense. So tell me, and we won't spend too much time on this, but what were some of the ingredients that led to a yes? I know that, some say money is widely available, but it's still, based on my experience in interviewing well over 100 founders, it's not just easy to get fundraising, right? There's a lot of choices that the investors have in terms of startup founders and different ideas. So what do you think were some of the sort of magic sauce that led to getting a yes?
I think really early on, my focus was less on asking for money and more about building relationships. And so the lead investor that we have in this current round, Impression Ventures, they had just casually reached out, toward the start of the year, just wanting to learn more. And, the way that I approach it is genuinely, I saw that they had a lot of experience in the fintech space. And so I just approached it from kind of that perspective of I've got a lot to learn here. And to this day, I still take, even though we're not actively fundraising, I still take meetings, and I'll still explain the vision and give my stump speech, because I feel like, you never know. And if you build relationships first, then, when it's time to ask for money, it's a lot easier, and they know you for who you truly are. Because I think a lot of the time, if that's the first, if you go into a conversation just with the thought of what can I get, what can I take away from this, or what can I get out of it versus what can I give, or how can we connect, then, that's, I think, where the challenge comes. And so it honestly, that first, it was our investor that really encouraged us to fundraise, because we were planning on holding off for a little bit longer. And basically, we just kind of came to the conclusion we were ready. And so we moved forward with it, and it wasn't as difficult as I imagined it would be. And I think it's because we had more of a relationship at that point.
How much, I guess this is dependent on the company and the founder, of course, but in your case, how much of the the yes was related to you as a person based on your individual characteristics, your background, et cetera, as compared to the idea of 401 Go in general?
I mean, the team certainly weighs into it. And I think in the earlier stage, that's of far greater importance than the idea or the execution or traction, because a lot of the time that's all they've got to invest in. We certainly had traction and we had a very viable product and, many customers. And so we were certainly further along than many other companies that are, going for a seed series investment. But I definitely say the team plays a big role, and not even, and not me in particular, but the team as a whole. I think it's imperative that, the team works well together, that they have complementary skill sets, that, the power dynamic is conducive. So we have four, co-founders, three that were very active in kind of that fundraising. And so that is kind of an interesting dynamic where I think they're looking at that much more than they will admit. And so, that's why at some point they want to meet all the other, founders and everybody that's involved, because, I think a lot of amazing companies with great ideas can be blown up over personality issues or the team. So it's hard to know because they don't ask you those questions. They're kind of having to make those assessments, by reading between the lines. But I know it is a big deal for any company at that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's transition to 401 Go. So tell me more about what it is and the audience that you all serve.
Yeah. So really, I think for most entrepreneurs, it really comes down to, it's like you identify a problem, and oftentimes it's associated with something that you have some personal experience with. Like I know for you in your business, it was, as a entrepreneur and operator, you realized how big an issue customer service was and call centers and that sort of thing. And so by, doing and being engaged in an industry or something, you get a sense of those friction points. And for me as a small business owner, the 401k was one in particular. I've always, early on, the first time that I tried to set up a 401k, I'll be honest, it was predominantly for my own benefit. It was that I was writing really fat checks to Uncle Sam, and I thought, how do I keep more of this for myself? And, at the time, I think I only had 3 employees. But as as I grew and learned more and kind of set aside that like pure economist viewpoint of, employers should just provide a paycheck and that's it. I realized that there's actually a lot of my employees do a lot more for me than just what has been asked of them. And I, want to do the same. And I think it's, there's kind of that family atmosphere, especially in small companies. And so the second time that I went to go set up a 401k, it was truly for the benefit of everyone else. In fact, I myself wasn't even participating in it at that point. But the challenge was there was just so much friction involved. And so I thought, let's build a solution. And we looked at all those things that made a 401k complex. And we were kind of scratching our heads saying, why hasn't anybody automated this? Yeah. And I think the problem is all of the industry leaders and everything else, a lot of them are insurance companies that existed in the 1800s. And so they just have this legacy of tradition. And, that's a lot of what their brand is built on is the fact they've been around forever. And because they've been around forever, they have a lot of legacy processes. They're very risk adverse. And so it's an industry that has a hard time modernizing and adapting. And so where we've seen marketing tech and so many other things become much more advanced in the 401k space, it was still very antiquated. So there was a big opportunity. And our focus first and foremost was really how do we, I was thinking of the business owner as my primary customer. This was a solution I was trying to solve for them. But really over the last year, it's kind of evolved to where when we looked at 401ks and utilization, even in, large corporations where they've had 401ks for some time, we saw an even bigger problem. It's that the people who need the help the most they're not using the 401k. And so it's not just that we had to bridge an access gap for small businesses and make it more available for small businesses, but also how do we improve the outcomes for all working Americans, and especially focusing on, because if we make it easy and if we can make a powerful 401k platform that people get excited about, for somebody that's making $15 an hour in their 20s, then yeah, the guy that's making six figures, closer to retirement, he'll be using it as well. And so our focus has pivoted a little bit to more, how do we improve the outcomes?
I see. Is it a challenge to convince founders, I guess in a fairly early stage of their business, the value of offering this to their employees? I mean, have you gotten pushback on that, or has that been difficult?
I think so. And I feel like most businesses in their early stage, I really feel like, and I don't have good data on this, but just kind of my gut instinct is that when we look around and we see the businesses that are in our community and the businesses that we're interacting with, most of those businesses were built, through bootstrapping and through, friends and family, and not the traditional venture capital route. And so you're always cash constrained, and even a venture-backed company is very cash constrained. And it's a challenge because it's during those early growth phases that you're starting to build that culture. You're hiring your first employees, and if anything, I feel like there's more apprehension. Employee number one, they walk into a building and it's probably small, a little bit dumpy. It might be some shared office space, or it might be your house or whatever. And you're trying to convince them to leave someplace that has, some level of security to come work for this crazy idea that you have. And one of the ways that they verify or they validate that it's something legitimate is not just the compensation, but it's everything. And having health benefits and having a 401k is a way of signaling, no, we're here and we plan on sticking around and we're taking this seriously. And so it's certainly a challenge, but I think the biggest challenge is that if anybody, any small business owner that's thinking about it, they say, I can't do that until I have an HR department, because that's often been the case in the past, because they are cumbersome and they're difficult to set up and administer, but they don't have to be. We fixed that. And so now we're trying to, kind of reverse, 30 some odd years of tradition that has told small business owners they can't have a 401k.
Yeah. I was going to say my initial pushback would not be as much on the money side, but more so on the time side. How long is this going to take me to set up? Because we have, I don't know that it's fair to say we have an HR department. We have people that focus on HR, but they have a lot on their plates. So if this is easy to set up, that would be a significant win in my mind. That sounds like that's kind of the idea. Yeah.
It is. And that's really, what it comes down to is, time and money, they're very, they're correlated. So anything that's taking a lot of time is also costing a company a lot of money, whether it's the owner that's doing it or, some HR professionals. And that's really, I think, the other thing that took me a little bit of time to realize is we were focused a lot on cost, because we do, we are 60 to 70% less expensive. And when you factor in those fees compounded over time for, somebody that's putting in an average amount into their 401k, by the time they get to retirement, the difference between what it costs, on our platform versus, the average, it's $250,000 because of the compounding effect of those fees. And so to me, that was the big focus, and it's because that's the way I think. But I think for, I've had to kind of pivot the message a little bit to focus more on, I'd say first and foremost, it's complexity. It's that even if it's a little bit expensive, if it's at all cumbersome, that small business owner doesn't want to deal with it. Yeah. And so we found that, and that's really what we had to fix first and foremost. And we are the first, and I think we're still the only ones that have a truly fully automated, like you can set up a plan in 15 minutes. I've noticed since we've been saying that, some of our competitors are saying the same thing, but all it really is on their end is it's a form fill where you fill out some information for a salesperson to contact you. And that takes less than 15 minutes. But at the end of the day, they're still sending you a DocuSign, or there's a human that still has to go through and, punch some buttons and do some work in a software program in order to actually set up the plan. And so that aspect alone, a process that normally takes the industry like 6 to 8 weeks to complete, that we can, do that in 15 minutes is quite remarkable. Yeah. And that the ongoing administration is truly hands off. For a small business, it really involves about maybe 10 minutes a year to just verify that, ownership hasn't changed in the company, and that's about it. Everything else is fully connected to the payroll system. So it really is leaps ahead. But it takes so much. It's our big, challenge now is making that known in the industry. And especially for, some of those incumbents that are just like, 6 to 8 weeks, that's normal.
Sure. I want to go big picture and nerd out a little bit here on retirement. So, in a previous life, I was a crimes against children detective in the police department and at the DA's office, and we had a defined benefit plan. So, basically a standard old school pension. My great grandfather, my late great grandfather, had this, right, and it was very common back then, and that's kind of the employees didn't do anything to worry about it. And then we switched over. I'm not sure at what point, but to define contribution plans, 401ks, et cetera. So
Yep.
I'm curious how you look at that shift, and if there's a struggle in adoption. Let's say you speak with the founder, and he or she is interested in adding this option to their 100-person team. What kind of adoption would you expect, and are you doing anything to sort of help increase that?
Yeah. So you bring up a really good point, and you clearly know quite a bit to know the distinction between defined benefit and defined contribution. And the way that we see it is, more than anything, it used to be, and a term I always say is, this isn't your father's 401k, and that's kind of one way that we're trying to model this, is even a more, because even the 401k I still feel is like, when I'm getting my hair cut and they ask what I do, if I'm just exhausted, it's the end of the day and I don't want to have a conversation, I tell them I work for a 401k company. And it's
Crickets.
like, okay, that's nice. They just go and they cut my hair, and that's no more. If I say, I'm an entrepreneur, or I'm involved in these different things, then, it's different. And so when everyone hears 401k, they mentally go to sleep.
Yeah.
And we get that, because that's kind of the experience that's been delivered so far, and we're wanting to change that. And I think more than anything, and really, if you look at the evolution of how people are preparing for retirement, what it really boils down to is that we ourselves need to take a little bit more responsibility than my father or my grandfather did. My grandfather, he worked for, I think, the military his entire life. And for a lot of people, like, that wasn't uncommon, that you would have a job. And so that's where it made sense. It's like, yeah, you work here, you put in your 40 years, and, when you retire, this is what it's going to look like. Now people are changing jobs sometimes monthly. I mean, hopefully, like, if I see somebody on a resume and they had a job for 3 years, I'm like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I got to talk to them. And so because of that, it makes more sense that we're much more personally involved in our own retirement. And that's where the 401k comes in. And our focus is really on how do we drive engagement? Because the problem is, and the plans that we promote the most with employers are ones where, because an employer can do, just a default contribution, let's say 4% of an employee's income, and the employee doesn't have to do anything. That's generous, but we don't necessarily like that, because it's not involving the employee and helping them, develop that saving behavior. And so for us, our focus is really how do we, and that's where, as we started to look into it and realize that, especially it's that lower quartile of wage earners that are, their enrollment rates are, like 20%, the participation rates in the 401k, whereas on our platform, we're seeing about 60% within that same, kind of demographic.
Why? What makes the difference?
It's friction. It's the fact that we've eliminated friction, that when we're in an enrollment meeting, because a lot of these employees, it's not that they don't want to save for retirement. It's not they're actively making a decision to not save for retirement. It's that there's barriers that are preventing that decision that might not be as strong as, like, maybe yours and mine would to engage in the 401k. And so when we're doing a virtual enrollment meeting, we say, hey, who's signed up? Number one, it's pretty exciting to see about half the room has already signed up just off of our notifications alone. And then with the remainders, we say, all right, pull out your phone. We're doing this now. And we get everybody either, enrolled or, they opt out. And they're like, it takes like 2 minutes. That was the easiest thing ever, because they've already had experience setting up their healthcare benefits and some of these other benefits. And like, yeah, I'll get to this when I've got like half hour time. Yeah. And that never comes. They go home and they've got other things they're dealing with, family, and, and if they're not dealing with responsibility, we want to play. There's a lot going on right now. And so if we can make it simple and reduce those barriers, to where just even like if we can make it like an impulse decision, the reason that we get that pack of gum or, that candy bar or whatever is because it's just so easy. It's right there. And you realize as you see it, oh yeah, I am hungry and I have been craving a Snickers. So you grab it and it's easy. And that's what we want to do with the 401k.
That's great. Let's transition to talking about one of your favorite topics, and that is culture. I want to start broad and then we can drill down. How do you define company culture? Yeah.
So, I mean, I think really what it comes down to is it's what your customers and your employees would say. And you know, and I don't even like the term employees. I'm going to say your team members, your family, because that's really, you know, the way that I view it. And we can, you know, and I always joke that, like, you know, we've got some competitors that, and I guarantee on their wall they have some, you know, like grand bold vision, like, you know, Google's do no harm or whatever. Yet some of the things that they're doing is just like downright wrong. You know, at the operational level. And so that to me shows there's a disconnect between like the culture that the company says they have and the vision and kind of those grand statements and what's actually happening at the end of the day. And so to me, it's really hard, and it's a very ethereal thing, that, you know, culture. And it's not just something that's written down. And I think the best way to really understand what a company's culture is to talk to their customers and to talk to, you know, the team that's working there, and, you know, look at ones that have exited the company, look at ones that have been there for a really long time, and they're going to tell you what the culture is. We certainly want to influence that, and we might have something that is, you know, that is written down, and we might have, you know, very formal statements surrounding it. But at the end of the day, you know, it's somebody else that applies that label, I feel like, rather than, you know, the owners or, you know, whoever has equity in the company. Okay.
All right. Fair enough. That makes sense. So, but when it comes to founders and leadership shaping culture, how do you look at that? And specifically, now this is complicated for me to wrap my mind around, but it's like, we're at somewhere around the range of 45 team members, full-time team members. And we're starting to get to the point where we're hiring people that David and I, my co-founder, have never interviewed or spoken to. So there's layers now between David and me and our ground level team, or frontline team members. And so what we've tried to do is impart upon our leadership team the culture and values, not just by stating those, but living those out. But where I'm really apprehensive is scaling. And it's kind of like, I look at like the telephone game, right? It's like where it gets to, that message gets to the third, fourth, fifth person, and it's skewed substantially. So how do you look at that in terms of scaling and maintaining an excellent culture?
I mean, it's a great question, and quite honestly, I've never scaled beyond that point. And I think it's one of those things where the reason I focused on it so much is in prior businesses, when you're small and you're entrepreneurial, like, you just feel it. Yeah. You walk in and you feel it. And so it's not, I don't have to be very deliberate in communicating that or structuring it. But as the company grows, it's in everything. It's in the, you know, the building or the way that you're officing, whether it's flexible or I think everything factors into that. And it becomes really difficult because it's not just something that you can easily write down. But I think that's certainly step one, is getting, you know, a number of stakeholders involved and saying, hey, what should our values be? And identifying like people that, or stories or situations, that can really, make it obvious what that really means. And so particular situations, you know, for customer success or something of that nature. And then, you know, really what it comes down to, and I think this is the more difficult part where oftentimes it goes wrong, it's in the small day-to-day decisions that oftentimes allow that culture to kind of go off the rails. Where, you know, if you talk about customer service and everything else, but then you dial into the phone system and it's some terrible, you know, calling tree where you got to push a bunch of buttons to talk to somebody. You know, it's little things like that you're thinking of it from a cost standpoint of, well, this is more efficient, and, you know, and so you're kind of stuck between this, I've got to optimize for cost and I've got to, you know, build the business and hit scale and everything else. But at the same time, there's other decisions that are being made that might be sending the wrong signal when it comes to culture. So, you know, for example, one thing that we're kind of at a stage right now is, the building that we're working out of, you know, I own it. I've got, you know, a few businesses that are operating here, and we have space to continue to grow. But when we had our, you know, last round of fundraising, I was kind of excited to go out and get some office space. So, you know, it's kind of our, you know, we could stop crashing on the, you know, the friend's couch or whatever. So it was our, you know, our own legitimate building. But then as I did that, at the same time, I realized, well, there's also a sense of frugality by staying here, and people get that we're, you know, that we're small and we have to be scrappy and nimble. And so, you know, that's a situation where, you know, the decision to go out and get some nicer office space, you know, we could afford it. It's in the budget. There's no reason we shouldn't, but at the same time, I could be going against that kind of culture that we have now of that startup, scrappy, very frugal culture by doing something of that nature. Where suddenly like, wow, we're big. We've got these nice offices and all this cool stuff.
I'm learning, and David and I are both learning very quickly that some of the decisions that we've made when we were much smaller, not that 45 is big, but like when we were 5 or 6 or 7, like, yeah, let's just do that. Let's do this. And then we kind of set precedents there. And then those decisions aren't so workable at larger scale. And especially thinking forward to potentially being much larger, it's like, oh man, it's like we've now taken much more of a pause to consider decisions like, okay, how does this decision impact the team and our sort of brand reputation, our culture now? And then how does this work, or does this idea or this decision scale? It's hard. Like growing pains are difficult.
It's difficult because a lot of the time, they're decisions, and our job is to take in as much information as we can in a short period of time and make a quick decision. And a lot of the time, some of those decisions do run in conflict with stated kind of vision or culture. And so that's where, and I think in like the 401k space, for example, a lot of these startups, they have all these. They've got this cool new task management system, the latest and greatest. It's ClickUp, and they've got, all these, communication software, marketing stack, and just all this amazing stuff. And then, they might even have some really cool benefits. And then the 401k is the same thing that their father had. Like they log in and they've got 10 funds to choose from, or they don't even log in. Like it's a form they have to fill out and get back to HR. And so that's where, it's one of those things that is kind of an unintentional misstep, is that they're trying to show that they're disruptors and they're innovative and they're cool. But because there was a decision that was made, and it was probably made by an HR person, so not even, that executive management. And, it's just kind of the same decision they've always made, but it does erode that kind of culture a little bit of we're cool and we're hip.
You need some like ad slogan that says, is your 401k as cool as your task management system, as cool as your CRM or whatever? It's like, that would be classic. That'd be great. You brought something up earlier. I wanted to circle back. So you all are obviously in person. Do you have any remote team members, or are you fully in office?
So we have, we're at about 15 right now. And of those, about half are in the office. And then the rest are remote. So we've got some developers that are, spread throughout the US, and then, most of the other team that are here, we're very flexible. We always have been. So that made it very easy to adapt to the, the whole remote working situation, the way our phone systems are set up, and our IT and everything else, really, was already well suited for remote working. So me personally, I like being in an office environment. I like being with coworkers. I've got 5 kids at home, so that's another thing that makes it difficult, especially when school's not in.
Yes.
So for me, it was good to be in the office, but we try to be flexible, and I think that's important.
Very much the same for me. I have 5 kids as well, and I have an office. We're a fully remote company, but I have a small office for myself, and I just needed that separation. And there's also something for me, psychological. Like when I walk through these doors, like it's time to work. That's what I do here.
Yes.
I can't work effectively at my dining room table or even a home office. Like maybe some people can, but I need to be in the zone in this environment. That helps me with that.
Totally. Yeah. I'm the same way. Like I've got a home gym, never use it. So, but I will drive 20 minutes to go to, the local gym or whatever to work out. For that same reason, it's like when I go there, I'm there for a very specific purpose. I'm focused, I get the work done, then I come to work, same thing. So for me, that's just how I work. And I think part of it is because I'm a little bit ADD and I can get very distracted. And so I need to, my environment needs to be conducive to whatever it is that I'm trying to do.
So have you given thought to building culture in a blended work environment where part of your staff is remote, part of them are in office? And specifically, like there's something that happens, like even when you have an offsite and you get together and you meet people in person, even if the team's remote, there's something magical that happens. So the next time that you see them remotely, you just kind of, the essence of the person, and it's different. But have you thought through bridging that gap, between your in-office team that sees each other every day, furthering relationships, and then your remote team?
I think, it's a challenge, and honestly, I can't say I've done a good job at that, but it has been something that I've thought about. How do we do that? And so we try to, like if we're going to go do a company lunch or something like that, I know it's stupid, but we tell everybody else, all our remote workers, hey, get on a Zoom call at this time. And we have the laptop sitting at the end of the table and they're all eating like whatever, Uber Eats brought them. And we're, there. And so at least we're like trying to show that, hey, we care. We know you guys exist. Because it is too easy to forget about them. Like some of the time when I'm sending out big group emails, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about, and we have this other new hire.
Yeah.
And so because they're not there and we're not seeing them all the time, it does make it harder. One thing that I know that I thought was kind of interesting is a lot of the time when I'm walking past like our, engineering team's desks, they're just coding and they have like Zoom running all the time. So they can kind of still be there impromptu. So I'd say, a significant amount of time, they'll have days where they're just kind of like on, Zoom, and maybe it's because they're working through like a big sprint or something like that. But I think just kind of having that visual communication and one thing I used to be, when people would dial in, if they didn't have their camera on, I'd be like, whatever, they don't want to be on camera. Now I tell them, please turn on your camera, and I'm like, I don't care if you're in your pajamas or whatever, like as long as you're decent, then, I don't like, I'm okay with that. I get it. But I want to see your face and, I can converse easier when, when I can see you and I can understand your emotions better.
Absolutely. I feel very much the same way. It's not the same as in person, but it's the next best thing, and not having your camera on is a hindrance to that. I want to shift gears here and go into like founder mindset, mental health. I'm curious, so when you get to the end of your day, on average, how often do you feel a sense of satisfaction and peace?
That's a good one. And I think that's honestly what I've struggled with the most over the last couple of years is mental health. And I do feel a lot of satisfaction in the work that I'm doing, but at the same time, like when I'm wrapping up my day, 6, 7 o'clock at night, like I've left it all on the court. I have nothing left, and that's the thing that I think hurts me the most is that I end up going home to the people that matter the most to me, and I've got nothing left, and that certainly has an effect, and so I'm trying to find ways of better managing that, and also kind of just balancing work to where, at the end of the day, it's like I still have like two or three things that I want to do, but I know that doing them is going to just, push me past the point of like mental or emotional or physical exhaustion. I need to say, you know what, it's okay for this to wait. And it's actually better for this to wait because I'll be fresher when I need to work on this. And it's so hard because, anybody that's kind of a founder or an entrepreneur or small business owner, they've got so much drive that, it's hard to find that off switch, or transition to where it's like, okay, now I need to be a dad, now I need to go home and have enough energy to go out and throw a ball with my kid.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate your vulnerability. That's certainly a very common struggle. And, we've collectively interviewed 140 plus founders, and I've interviewed a good chunk of those. And quite often I find that we chat about mental health, and a lot of founders, including myself, have therapists. And it's interesting because my therapist is like, she's a therapist and then also a business coach as well. It's like, and not by her actual definition. That's just like part of the role that she's evolved into. But it's nice to have somebody to bounce things off of and to share with. But I'm curious, before we move on, like what do you think it is that drains you so much when you get to the end of these days, you just feel done and your energy's zapped? Like, what is it that does that to you during the course of the day?
I think it's that, maybe some of the decisions that we're making, and I oftentimes find myself doing this, I'm putting too much of myself into the decision. And so there's times where, like we're going through a marketing thing and I'm reviewing like some trade show graphics or something. And I'm saying that's not good enough, because I know that we can do better. And I know that it's going to be some work to push and to show them how it can be better, when I need to sometimes just say, this is fine. Like, why am I, why do I, like, I'm at the point of diminishing returns. Yeah. And so I can give 90% and it's still going to get the job done. versus, and it doesn't mean, this isn't an excuse to offer subpar
No, I hear what
service
you're
or
saying.
anything like that.
Yeah.
It's that when, in some of the decision making, it's understanding that, at some point we're pushing more than we necessarily need to. And I think a lot of that is just that kind of personality that many entrepreneurs have. And so for me, I think that's it. And then also, employee matters. I think those for me are like so emotionally taxing, because I feel like one of my number one roles as a leader in, whether I'm the CEO or I'm a manager of a team of three, is one of like a leader's role is to make sure that everybody can work as effectively as possible. And so when there's friction going on, it's that compulsion to step into something when it might not be necessary, and it's kind of like, well, I've got the answer, so let me step in and help them. And oftentimes I'm taking on more than I need to. And so I think it's having kind of that balance between, I need to care about my people and I need to understand that I care about them and my team and my family. But at the same time, that doesn't mean I have to take on their burdens.
Right.
And so that's a challenge that I find myself, having regularly is, I genuinely care about, this work family that I have. And some of the time, I'm not compartmentalizing that as best as I should.
Do you feel like that you're able to release yourself from the pressure of the expected outcome? And I feel what you're saying. Like I regularly feel weighted down. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but it's like the weight of responsibility of our team. And our mission is to create 10,000 high-paying, highly autonomous jobs in 10 years in developing countries. And there are major problems in work environments and the way people are treated in developing countries, and specifically in-office environment versus remote. And there's a weight of responsibility, especially when I know that a lot of our staff take care of not only themselves and their immediate family, but extended family as well. And we pay considerably better, like 2 to 2.5 times better than our competitors. And there's a weight that I have is like, what if we lose this client? What if this doesn't go well? And I know that I've done my very best and the team has done their very best, but the result still could be negative, right? And I struggle with releasing myself from that pressure to know that like, I even though I did my best, we did our best, we still may lose a client. This ultimately may not work out. We know the numbers are not good in terms of success among startups.
Yeah.
So how do you personally balance that and that weight of responsibility?
It's a challenge. And, I think that there was a pivotal moment where I had kind of a small marketing company. And it was, 2007, 2008. And at the time, a very large portion of my clients were home builders, and home builders were hit the worst, during that last recession. So there was a 6-month period where my receivables, were 60 grand, and basically, 6 months of income that I was expecting just never came. And the thing, for me and other people I was working with doing freelance stuff for, they're like, hey, I didn't get paid, so I can't pay you. But the one thing that I refused to do was to pass that buck on. And so, the freelancers and the people that I hired for gigs that I was responsible for, they all got paid and I didn't at the end of the day. And, it was so bad that I had to sell off, cars and I sold off we had 2 cars for my wife and I. And so we sold off one of them. I sold off equipment, and I sold, it's actually in a way, when it was all done, it was very refreshing because I kind of unburdened myself from a lot of this stuff. But at the same time, it was mentally tormenting because I remember, family members reaching out saying, hey, can I help you? And I told them like, no, I have to go through this on my own. And, there were times that I'd laid in bed, just really concerned about, hey, where am I going to be a year from now? How am I going to make the mortgage payment? How am I going to, feed the family? And, at that time I had my daughter and my wife next to me, and I just looked and I said, this is all that matters. Like if I'm living in a tent under a bridge, it will certainly never come to that. But if that's where I end up, that's okay. Like, and just realizing that at the end of the day, like that's all that matters. And since then, that was a galvanizing moment for me where I said, first and foremost, I will never, ever, ever put somebody else that I have, taken stewardship over. So, an employer or something of that nature in that position. And because of it, when I went out and hired my first employees, the first thing I did was go to the bank and I got a big fat line of credit. And it's like, I don't touch that. If push comes to shove, I will make sure that people get paid as I wind down the company and I don't get paid myself. And I don't think it's a burden that we'll ever really release. And so the only way for me is to know that whatever happens, I'll make sure they're taken care of. And at the end of the day, I've got my family.
Yeah.
And I think just remembering that and remembering this is why I'm doing this, like that brings me a little bit of peace, but I know what you're feeling because it's like, I feel it now far more than ever, especially because I have other investors. I have other people that are saying, I'm betting on you, I'm betting on your team. Like that, I can feel that weight. I can feel it, much more than I ever have before.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I'm confident that your team and the investors picked the right guy. I know you're not saying that to get accolades from them, but I do hope they listen and watch this because that's really respectable. And I think a lot of people believe that, maybe some people believe that founders are kind of an arrogant bunch, but I found the exact opposite. The founders that I've spoken with, by and large, the vast majority have been incredibly humble and very well grounded. So I appreciate that insight and your vulnerability to share that. Man, we are almost out of time, and that really sucks. I could keep talking to you for a very long time. Let's wrap up with this. You've been at this a while, and you have a lot of experience. I'm curious, if you went back, you can pick the time frame, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever, and gave your former self advice based on what you know now, what would you share?
So first and foremost, mental health. It's something that, and I think it's kind of our nature too. It's like, I did my first yoga class yesterday, and I use that as a good example because yoga is about, like, you've got to be strong, but it's also about precision and balance and everything else. And I think that we need to approach life more like yoga. Whereas for me, I'm like, give me something big and heavy and I'm just going to push through it. Like I just have kind of a brute approach to everything, including business. And so it's like, if I was feeling sad, it was like, buck up, buttercup, you shouldn't feel that way, and just push on. And I neglected to really recognize, some of the things that I was going through or feeling, and I just kind of pushed them aside. So I think mental health first and foremost, and that could be different. It might be a therapist. It might be, finding some really good hobbies that are released, but whatever that is, mental health, make sure that it is something that we're thinking about. And then the other thing too is I'd say networking. Again, it's kind of that same thing. Is it's like, I didn't go to a lot of business socials, and my whole focus was like get in, get the work done, work twice as hard, and that's where success comes from. And it has worked, but I feel like I could have certainly taken a much easier path, having learned from others, having connected with others, and found others that can join me in my journey, and I can join them in theirs. And so those are the two big things. I'd say, mental health and networking, find some peers that can, tackle these same big, hairy problems we're all going through together.
Well, thank you, Dan. I really appreciate the wisdom that you've shared and your graciousness with your time as well. So the website is 401go.com. We'll have a link to the website, link to your LinkedIn, but what's the best way for folks to reach out if they're interested in learning more?
LinkedIn's always good. And then on the website, we have various, chats and everything else. And I always love, connecting with, I think that's probably the favorite thing about what I get to do now is every day I still make sure I take sales calls so I can, talk with other small businesses, because I really do. I love to hear the amazing things that are happening. And it's really fulfilling to see these business owners step in, a small 5-person company, and see the very generous acts that they're doing to take care of their employees. I'd love to chat with anybody that wants to learn or discuss 401ks or anything.
Perfect. Yeah. I'm actually interested in talking to you real quick offline here about our own business. So we'll definitely do that, but really appreciate your time, Dan. Hope you have a good afternoon.
Yeah. Thanks.
Cheers.
You too.